Politics is fun. It's the fun part of my life. So it's not a burden. It's a joy. I can't believe I at one point said I hate politics. I love it. I'm really happy where I am and happy to be making the impact that I am. And I think if anything, if anyone's listening to this, someone told me once politics is fun, and it is. It really is. When you get involved in it and you're able to make a difference, it is fun.
And it's empowering. It's empowering to say, you know what, I don't like this about my life, but there's someone sponsoring a bill about this exact issue, and I can go and lobby. I can call my representatives and ask them to vote for it. And if they don't, then I have the power to organize against them and vote them out. So.
I'm Dr. Stephanie Wilson. I'm a historian, an activist, and the host of the Freedom Over Fascism podcast, where we talk to people who give us insight into the current political moment, inspiration for state and local organizing, and connections with our co-conspirators all across the country. You'll meet rural organizers who focus on electing young and diverse candidates, independent journalists who prioritize democracy over disinformation, and candidates building change at the state and local level. I invite you to join the Freedom Over Fascism community and listen to Freedom Over Fascism wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you so much for joining Politics for Parents today. I'm Nicole Tate, and I am here with the amazing Margie Donlon, Assemblywoman Margie Donlon from the 11th Legislative District of New Jersey. And Margie, I really appreciate you taking the time because you're so busy. You are a mom. You are a physical medicine and rehab physician. You are a surfer, which I know is amazing. I don't know how you find the time for that. And of course, you are New Jersey's 11th, the Assemblywoman representing New Jersey's 11th legislative district in Trenton. So before you leave, I want to talk offline about your health regimen, your sleep schedule, how you do it all, because you must have pristine health to have the energy to do it all.
Well, that's an incredible assumption. I would suggest that no one take any of my recommendations for health because I don't get enough sleep. I try to get exercise and, keep a balanced life. But.
Superhuman genetics. We'll just leave it at that. So anyway, thanks for taking the time. You're super busy. And I also, I appreciate that you took the time to be here today. And I also appreciate, I want to say, I follow you on social media, and I know you're a surfer, and I want to just call that out because as a lifelong athlete, I run, I make a point to exercise because for me, I know I need to make that time for self-care, to be my best self, to show up for my family, to show up at work. So I just want to say, it's great that you, do that. And I think, those of us who kind of know that, we should try to put that out there and advocate that moms do take that time.
Absolutely. So important.
And, I'd love to just start talking about your journey into politics.
Okay, great.
Because your professional background speaks for itself. Let's see, you've got degrees from Middlebury College, Yale University, the University of Rochester School of Medicine. You're a medical doctor. So professionally speaking, you've got it together. And then you decided to go into politics. So what happened? Why would you do that?
I know. It's been a long journey. I think I'd never really liked politics. I grew up outside of D.C., actually. So we had the aura of politics there all the time, and I just kind of pushed against it. I studied a variety of things at Middlebury. I studied film and English, broad liberal arts, but I also did pre-med while I was there. And I was geared to going to medical school. And I think a couple things sort of derailed my path a little bit from going directly into medical school. One thing was I got a summer scholarship to go to Romania to learn about healthcare in Romania, and a team of pediatricians who were bringing equipment over there, like ventilators for hospitals that they had never really used before because during communism, they didn't have that type of equipment, and they were very far behind in terms of care. So this one group, this foundation was bringing equipment there, and they invited a student to come in with them. And because I was a filmmaker, I studied documentary film, I brought my camera and made a documentary, a short documentary film about these dilemmas that these doctors faced, like dealing with, okay, we do have equipment, but we might not know how to use it, or we might only have one ventilator, and how do you decide which babies get that ventilator when they need it? So there's just all these really interesting things that were popping up. And I also found out in Romania, doctors were actually the lowest paid providers in the hospital. They were lower paid than the janitors and everybody, because they had to, there was a couple days where they had to protest for their wages, and the doctors couldn't leave their patients. So the janitors, everybody, all the other workers got higher salaries after communism, but the doctors actually ended up not getting paid as much through the state. So, and there was this interesting two-tiered system where people would, have to pay under the table and, to get good care. So I was learning a lot about how politics and, government can shape quality of health care. And so that was one thing that kind of keyed me into like how important politics is to providing good health care. The second thing is I worked at a physical therapy clinic. That was my first job after college. And there I was not only taking care of patients, but, putting hot packs on, helping them through the warm-up exercises. But I had to call the insurance companies to check to see whether they could get 5 visits or 10 visits or 20 visits. And I was just shocked by the inequities in terms of, what patients needed and how much they were provided. It just felt like somebody else was making these decisions, not the clinicians. So I decided to get a master's in health policy at that point. I thought, the bigger changes, I could help more people by going looking at health policy. So that's when I went to Yale University to get my master's in health policy. While I was there, I did a lot of really interesting work on policy, but it felt like even if you had good policy, if you didn't have the people in office to uplift that policy, then nothing would happen. So it felt really stagnant and slow. Like you could, have a great healthcare policy providing universal health care, for example, but if you don't have the right number of Democrats versus Republicans in Congress, it just was not going to go anywhere. So I felt really frustrated by the slow pace of policy and politics, and I said, you know what, maybe I'll be able to help people more on an individual basis. So that's when I applied to medical school, ultimately went to the University of Rochester. I told you this was a long story.
I love a long story. Anyone who asks my career journey, how I ended up where I am right now, it's a long story, so I get it.
So I went to medical school, did my residency in physical medicine and rehabilitation, where I take care of patients with mostly disabilities, and graduated residency, started working, moved down to the shore, and I think local politics, because I'd moved around so much, wasn't such a forefront at my forefront of my mind. Because I was going to different states, different colleges. And then the election of 2016 happened, and it just really woke me up to how divisive things can be and how all politics starts at the local level. So I wanted to make a change. My daughter was 6 years old at the time, and I was driving her to school one day, and she said she saw I was upset by the news, and she said, Mommy, I think you should run for president. And that was a call for me to get more involved. Not that I have any inspirations to run for president, but I realized that we need more people to step up at the local level. So I applied for a program called Emerge New Jersey.
I am an Emerge alum as
That's
well.
right.
Yes, very recently.
I'm actually not an Emerge alum. I applied for the program. I called, the application date had passed. I said, can I still submit my application? And it was my only link into how do you run for office, So they said, sure, submit your application. And I submitted my application. They invited me for an interview, and I met this wonderful woman, a councilwoman, Sid Wally from Spring Lake. And she, the interview went well, but I was so new to it, so I actually wasn't accepted into the program.
Oh, my goodness.
But there's always wins and losses, right? Yeah. So I encourage everyone to go for it, no matter what you're doing. But so I wasn't accepted into the program, but Sid said, reach out to the Monmouth County Democrats and get in touch with them and see, maybe you can, if there's something you can run for. And there's a lot of there's a lot of supportive people, including the chair at the time, Vin Gopal, who is now our senator in the district, who is very supportive of women running for office. So having someone like that I reached out to and kind of got me more involved. So I ran for freeholder, which is the county commissioner position. And it's for Monmouth County, which happens to be a very Republican district. Very mixed district, but the county level has always been pretty stronghold for the Republicans. And it's a huge county. So I said, I'm just going to jump into it. Let's go for it. And I lost that race.
I supported you. That's how we met. My daughter's first political event at 6 months old was coming to one of your fundraisers.
That's incredible. What a memory. Oh my goodness.
I'm a class of 2016 activist. Well, I came back off the sidelines after.
That's right. Now I remember. I called you. I remember calling you, and they were like, "Call Nicole. She's great. She'll support." We hadn't even met, and I called you and I invited you.
I was like, yes, I will be there.
That's right.
With my newborn.
Women supporting women. That was awesome. So that's how I got started in politics.
And I mean, there's so much to unpack there. First of all, it is not surprising that you need to leave D.C. and get out of that environment. And that turns you off from politics. I went to American University for my first 2 years of undergrad, and I thought I wanted to work in politics. And that experience turned me away as well. And I think that's kind of why I started this podcast, because I think so many people and I think you'll agree, they don't consider themselves political because they are sick of the toxic rhetoric, the us versus them, the jockeying. And I think some of the morals and the motivations of people in D.C., right? They, that is just not really, I mean, they call it the swamp. You can't always, disagree with that and the way things work there. But I mean, so much of our lives is political. As you point out, the medical system on its own is political. And I think it's great that we have someone like you, and I'd love to see more people that have their own professional expertise and backgrounds. They're not looking for a career in politics because they want power or they want to feel that sense of accomplishment. You bring a very valued experience to those discussions on policy, and that's what we need. Someone who's objectively listen, this is my field, and this is what's best for people.
Right. Absolutely.
And I'd love to talk for a minute. We touched upon, you're a mom. It's hard. It's busy. But, this podcast is all about getting parents involved, right? And I think, as a working mom, you understand, first of all, how to balance things, but also one of the things that I get frustrated with in the media is this, oh, you can have it all. It's you can't. You're always juggling. You're always making trade-offs of I'm spending my time here versus there. So I'd love to talk a little bit about how you actually do it, because there's no doubt days where you're exhausted and it's tough, and maybe you worked really hard on a bill or a vote and it didn't go your way. So how do you keep yourself going in those moments? What advice or words would you have for other moms who are I'd love to get more involved, but I am just so busy, I don't know how I'm going to do it. How do you get through those times?
It's so important. I mean, first of all, life has ebbs and flows. You can't do it all at the same time. And I can go through my life and tell you there's times when, I didn't work for the first 2 years after my daughter was born. My primary goal was taking care of her, and then I went back part-time. So I've kind of built it in. Now I have a super supportive husband, so that really helps. I have to be honest. Having a team, whether it's family or caregivers, to help you is really important. And then advocating for yourself where, you make that time, and that your time is important because your voice is important. And having those people to help you through those other aspects. I think going through all of this, I do have a hierarchy a priority list when I sort of triage my day-to-day. And my kids are always first. Number one, if they get sick or anything, I'm absolutely there. And then number two, my patients come second because their needs are, they're like my second family. And then politics is third. But fortunately, I have a good team behind me with everybody to help with that. And then sometimes you have to triage, what's important. If things are happening, that's really important that day. If I have to be in Trenton that day, that becomes number one, Of course, unless one of my kids gets sick or something like that. But so I have this things shift on a day-to-day basis, and you just need to know where you need to prioritize your attention at that time. And I think learning the lessons from medicine, triaging, who are your most critical patients that you have to attend to, I think also applies to the day-to-day basis. But it's a puzzle, it's a shifting puzzle piece every day, where the schedule lies. I look at my schedule the next day and where can I fit in seeing my patients. I'm very fortunate that my job, I don't have set appointments, so all my patients are inpatient rehab patients where I can see them in the morning, I can see them at night, I can even see them on the weekends. So if I can't go to see my patients on a Friday because I'm going to be in Trenton voting on bills or in committees, I'll see them on a Saturday or a Sunday. So, I don't get a lot of downtime, but I love what I do. So it's like, it feeds me. It makes me happy, and politics is fun. It's the fun part of my life. So it's not a burden. It's a joy. I can't believe I at one point said I hate politics. I love it. I'm really happy where I am and happy to be making the impact that I am. And I think if anything, if anyone's listening to this, someone told me once politics is fun, and it is. It really is. When you get involved in it and you're able to make a difference, it is fun.
And it's empowering. It's empowering to say, you know what, I don't like this about my life. But there's someone sponsoring a bill about this exact issue, and I can go and lobby. I can call my representatives and ask them to vote for it. And if they don't, then I have the power to organize against them and vote them out. So
absolutely.
I love that. And I love how you ended that on a positive note, because now I want to shift to the positive. I'd love to hear about some of your best days, some of your biggest wins. You were elected this past November, and that was a tough race. So imagine, I remember watching the results come in on your race, and my husband and I were sitting on the couch. We're like, they won freehold. They're going to win this thing, and not just win it by a little bit. You guys won by a lot. We were really excited for you. So that's got to be up there. But what else? There's some of your big wins, your moments where you're like, that was just wonderful.
Yeah, that was a huge day. I mean, I remember going into that day, having lost my previous big election, I was, you never want to assume things, and you have a feeling, but that day we spent on the phone calling, making sure everyone comes out to vote, because literally every vote counts, and you don't really know what's happening until maybe midday, where you see a lot of people are showing up, and it's a good feeling. So that was definitely a highlight. Some other big days, I remember going. So some of the bills that we work on, they might in the state, they might not seem like huge wins to so many people, but I'll give you an example. There's this thing. We have one clubhouse in New Jersey. It's in Long Branch, and it's pretty much all privately funded. A clubhouse is basically a place where people have gone through recovery or mental illness. They've finished their programs, they're done with their treatment programs, and they're back living on their own. But they need that support going forward to live productive lives, to go back to work, and to have that team support. So they have them all over, for example, Wisconsin and New York. But in New Jersey, we don't have that here as a model. And one of the reasons is that Medicaid, we didn't have a law which would allow Medicaid to cover funding for it. So one of the bills that went through the Senate and passed through the Senate this year through our Senator Van Gopal was to provide that Medicaid support. And this clubhouse in New Jersey, I was at their fundraiser when they announced that this had passed through the Senate. It's still working its way through the Assembly, but to hear them speak how important it was for their future, because this will open up the doors to have clubhouses across New Jersey. Yeah. So and to help those people. So even small wins are big wins for us. So when we have a bill like that go through committee or pass, we're so excited.
Well, I love that, because that is a topic that probably isn't going to get the big headlines of the day. But for the families, right? I have an aunt who's mentally disabled. Or for anyone who has a family member or a loved one in that community benefiting from that service, that is huge. That is life-changing. So I think that's wonderful. It's a great example. And it's a great segue to kind of the next question I had that I want to cover is, I think at the federal level, people are pretty familiar when like the IRA gets passed or Congress does something big. But I think, one of the roles of this podcast is to really highlight state level government, because state government has a lot of power on your day to day. And I know in New Jersey, I think you recently introduced a bill to cap college tuition at 2% per year, the increase, which anyone who's got a 529 and is like wondering how to get enough money for their kids to go to college, that's huge. So I'd love to talk about a little bit like the role that you guys play, some of the bills that you've passed or you're working to pass, and kind of, let folks know a little bit about like the role that state government plays here in New Jersey in their lives.
Yeah, so that bill you mentioned, capping tuition at 2%, is something we hear from our constituents all the time. It's just affordability is the number one issue in New Jersey. Property taxes in this area are really high. When I was on local government, I served on council in my town. That was the number one issue. So anything we can do to help our constituents with affordability and education, as you know, the costs are going through the roof, and it's just really difficult for parents to afford college. So capping the tuition for the tuition rates for individuals is important, because we don't want things to get cost shifted to them. The state provides a certain amount of funding to the schools. They have their own basis of funding, but I think a lot of the deficit gets shifted to the students. And so looking at that bill, we're going to have to listen to a lot of stakeholders. So we're going to have the community colleges, the parents, the students, and then also the state colleges, and everybody come. So we're going to have everyone sit at the table and work through that.
Yeah. And is that for public universities or private as well? Like, is Princeton going to be impacted?
This bill is for state funded state universities, community colleges. Yeah.
Makes sense. Cool. And kind of piggybacking off that, I think New Jersey's pretty strong in some areas when it comes to policy. I think, off the top of my head, our gun laws are quite strict compared to other states. I think New Jersey's one of the first states, maybe the second, I want to say, behind maybe like another on family leave, paid family leave. We were early on that. So I'd love to hear a little bit about like where New Jersey leads and where maybe it lags. Like one area I think we could be a little bit stronger on. I think Michigan is a hallmark for voter registration and access to voting. But where are some places you think New Jersey leads on policy? Where do you think we can do better?
Well, you mentioned one of the important ones, which is gun safety. And that's an issue that's near and dear to my heart, just because I've seen a lot of patients who suffer from gunshot wounds and have had their lives upended and changed. And in New Jersey, we are an example for almost the rest of the country. So we actually had somebody come present us with a pin from a girl who died in the Uvalde shootings in Texas. Her name was Mayte. She passed away in that school shooting, tragically, with an assault rifle. But an advocate who has made it her mission to visit all the state houses across the country to present us with her story. And she came to us last week, and she mentioned how New Jersey has the strongest gun laws in New Jersey, and how she wishes other states would follow suit. So that is one thing that I think New Jersey leads on, like you mentioned. Things that I think we still have work to do. There's just so many bills. Oh my goodness, so many areas where we do need more work. I'm trying to think of one of the ones. Well, one of the bills that we had just recently passed, and I believe is signed into law now. We just voted on it last session. Was making sure the deaf community has access to interpreters. We were one of the last states to get going on that. So there's certain things for people who need help with like mental health, or we really want to prioritize that in the state of New Jersey, which we are. My team and I are prioritizing mental health issues.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really important one. And housing, obviously.
And housing,
the cost of housing
absolutely.
is like insane.
Yes.
But I think that's like a national trend too. And there's so many other things playing into it, like the financial sector where my previous life was. So that's a whole other ball of wax we can get into next time. So I think, one of the goals that I've set of this podcast is to empower parents with information and like tangible steps they can take to get more involved. So I'd love to talk to you about like what advice would you have for parents who are working, going to soccer practice, helping with homework, that are like, I care so much about this, and I'm not happy with the way things are for my family, and I'd love to harness some political power and advocate, but I don't even know where to start. And I think, as I mentioned before, people are really turned off by like the national rhetoric. So what kind of advice would you give to people looking to kind of like get involved or get the lay of the land or just kind of like get into it a little bit?
Yeah, so I think like everything starts at the local level, depending on what you're advocating for. I think one area, when I was on council, I was a liaison to the Environmental Commission and the Green Team, the Shade Tree Commission. Every town has one of those boards, and I think starting locally, if you're interested in advocating for environmental issues, calling your town hall and finding out, hey, I'm just putting sometimes they have applications, or where I live in Ocean Township, we had like a pool where you could a talent bank where you could kind of send your resume in. But I think volunteering for those boards, and it's not that much time. Often they meet once a month. Usually it's like an hour meeting in the evening, and then doing what you can. So first of all, looking locally, because I think that's where the change happens the most, and you can do the most. But then also, whenever there's an issue that comes up that you feel strongly about advocating for, call your legislators, know who they are. A lot of people don't even know what an assemblywoman is or does, but we love hearing from our constituents. We've had a number of bills, the idea for them come from people who, have said, well, this is an issue and I don't know how, can we do something about it? And then we'll, get together with our policy team and write a bill that we think helps address that. Or if there's bills out there, I think advocating for certain things, always be in touch with your legislators. It's pretty easy, the information's there, you just look it up online. Yeah. But phone calls, emails, we're always tracking, like if there's a particular bill, if people are for it or against it, supportive. So it's always helpful to hear from everybody. So a phone call, email.
I will say, I am one of those people that's usually in open communication with a lot of my representatives, and you guys are really responsive. I think Vin Gopal is one of the most responsive representatives I've ever had. I've sent him emails at like 9:00 at night, and he's emailing me 10 minutes later. He's like, oh, let me get my policy director on this. This is interesting. But so I will say, it works. It works. You guys are great representatives, and you're so responsive, especially when people don't agree with you, because it's not always me saying, oh, I really like that you did this. Sometimes it's me or my husband saying, hey, you can't sponsor this. This is like, you got to hear the other side. So I will say that like you guys are super responsive, and it is worth it to represent. And on the other side, if you do take the time to reach out to someone that represents you and they do not respond, and you feel like that they are not representing you, then maybe it's time to figure out who is running against them, right? And engage that person. That's true. Accountability is kind of, the hallmark of democracy. That's where, it's us holding our elected officials accountable is a really important part of democracy. So having said that, for folks who are listening to this, if they're really interested in this bill you're working on the tuition caps, or maybe any other legislative things happening in the state house, what are some quick, easy ways to get involved? What are kind of the next steps on the tuition cap bill, or other things that are kind of moving their way through Trenton that people might want to look at, reach out to their representative, reach out to you on? What's like a quick, easy thing? Because one of the things, I don't want people to listen to this and say, okay, I'll like look at a website and I'll think about doing this, but I'd love to give someone a next step, right? Like what's a quick and dirty next thing you can do that's just going to take a few minutes?
Right. So Trenton, we're in legislative sessions from September We just finished our recent legislative session at the end of June when we passed the budget. So right now we're in our postseason. But now is a great time to call us about any bills that you've read about in the news or hear about. So if you want to call or send an email, I mean, literally that's all it takes. So that's the most basic, simple thing. We have elections coming up in the fall, right? The big national election.
I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah.
What, president, you say?
But we also have a lot of local elections too.
Yeah.
And county elections, which are super important. I mean, here in Monmouth County, like I mentioned, I ran for that commissioner race 7 or 8 years ago, whenever it was. And it's a big race. Right now there's it's a body of five people. There's one person up for election, and if you can get involved in local races, it makes a huge difference.
And I think one of the things too is not even if there's like a specific bill, right? But even if you have just like an issue or a gripe, right? A grievance. I wrote your office the other day because I had a series of like issues with medical billing. Like there was a lot of errors in medical billing that happened at my children's pediatric office, and with like almost no notice, I got a statement for over $1,000, and I got like a collections notice. And I'm like, what is this? Like my health insurance covers this. I know I'm in net, like this is crazy. And I spent so much time sifting through it, and it was really just an error on their fault. So I just emailed you guys, listen, this is what I just went through. Who knows who else is impacted by this kind of stuff? Who knows who like pays these erroneous bills out of their pocket, thinking they just like need to avoid collections. And like I know when I have those instances where, you know, that or like there's a county road that I think is really dangerous and we need to get like another stoplight, like, you know, I kind of just bring that stuff to your office, and usually you have like some type of a reply or response. Maybe it's something you're already working on. I know, like, with regard to medical debt, there was a law recently passed and signed into law by the governor. So, you know, I also want to put that out there for people, like, even if you don't know, like, what specific bill is in the works or you don't have time to look up the docket in Trenton, I mean, it's worth just saying, like, hey, is there anything you can do about this? Because, like, this is something that I think is BS and I don't like it. You know?
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's really important. And then we can point you in the right direction where, you know, sometimes it just feels like this nebulous mass, like who's in charge of what, you know. But I think, yeah, you can always call our office. We're always happy to help. Get you, for example, if there's an issue with a county road, if it's a county road versus a state road, like the county's in charge of it, but you might not know it's a county road. Yeah. But we're very happy to get you in touch with, and I think that's important to have working relationships with everybody at every level of government, you know, and work in a bipartisan manner. So, for example, like I mentioned, our county government is mostly Republican, but having those relationships and knowing who to reach out to with issues at the county level, we can always do that. So, and at the local level too, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Always reach out.
Always reach out.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us here today. Hopefully, you know, some folks listening will take, you know, a little bit of inspiration from you and your journey. I also think it's great that, you know, you had this professional background and you're bringing that to your service. It's not like in order to be involved in politics, you have to like intern on the Hill your freshman year and that's all you ever do, right? So I love that. And I just encourage everybody to, you know, follow the Substack, Politics for Parents. You know, every episode will come with show notes, so we'll put it in links where you can figure out who represents you very quickly. Look it up. You know, we'll do follow-ups on any bills. I'm going to be following this tuition rate one. I think it's amazing. I wish the federal government would do that. That would be wonderful. But anyway, so thank you for joining us at Politics for Parents. Follow us on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, Substack, Instagram. We're there, and very excited to have you all here. So thank you so much. Thank you, Assemblywoman Donlon.
Of course. Happy to be here.
All right.